I invite you to stand as we read together the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. He entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down and was happy to see him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He has gone to be guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." Thanks be to God. And you may be seated.
So I'll be honest, I just don't have a lot of funny illustrations today, but we need a little levity even in worship. So we're going to watch a video of this Zacchaeus story.
Stories of the Bible. Zacchaeus. This is Zacchaeus.
Hey there.
Who was a tax collector and very rich. Tax collectors were hated because many people thought they were liars and cheaters. Zacchaeus lived in Jericho, and one day, Jesus was passing through Jericho.
What's going on? Jesus is here! Woohoo!
Zacchaeus wanted to see who Jesus was.
Excuse me. Hey, what's going on?
But he was too short to see above the crowd.
Oh, that's it.
So he ran ahead to a place where he knew Jesus would come. He climbed to a sycamore tree so he could see Jesus. When Jesus came to that place, he looked up and saw Zacchaeus in the tree.
Oh, hey there, Fred.
Who? Me?
Yeah, you.
He said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. I must stay at your house today."
Oh, all right.
Zacchaeus came down quickly. He was pleased to have Jesus in his house. All the people saw this and began to complain. Look at the kind of man Jesus stays with. Zacchaeus is a sinner. But Zacchaeus said to Jesus, "I will give half my money to the poor. If I have cheated anyone, I will pay that person back 4 times more." Jesus said, "Salvation has come to this house today."
What?
This man truly belongs to the family of Abraham. The Son of Man came to find lost people and save them.
Sometimes it helps to see things from a childlike perspective. Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus. You wouldn't be here if you didn't want to see Jesus. How do you seek to see Jesus? Some of us do it through times of quiet or retreat. I just did a lot of that. We do it by coming to worship, by studying scripture, by engaging in service. Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus, and he went for it with gusto. It says he ran ahead and he climbed up a tree. And you kind of hand it to him, that's a lot of effort. Surely he must have wanted to get away from the very real problems that were happening on the ground. Who wants to be in the middle of a crowd of people that hate you? Zacchaeus climbed up, and Jesus saw him there. In a former congregation, a parent was telling me about raising his 2 kids, and he said when we would go out to, call them in for supper, normally you kind of scan the yard, maybe the neighbor's yard, and you call, and that's what he and his wife would do when they were calling their son. But when they were calling their daughter, who was quite adventurous and continues to be adventurous as an adult, her profession is in auto parts sale. Talk about making your way in a traditionally man's world. He said, yeah, when we would call Heather, we would go out and just look up because she was in a tree somewhere. But that's not normal. That's not normal. Jesus looked up and he saw Zacchaeus, like Jesus always does. He sees the people that no one else sees, the one on the outside, the widow, the orphan, the person who needs to be healed, the leper. Jesus always sees the one on the outside. He sees the sinner. Now, in those days, the term sinner, similar to our day, wasn't just a descriptor. It was a slur. So when it says he was a sinner, that was like, it was a slur to say he's on the outside. Zacchaeus was the chief tax collector. This means that he was a Jew that worked for the Romans. They had developed a brilliant system called tax farming. They would take bids from a member of the Jewish community, someone like Zacchaeus, and they would go with the highest bid. They would hire the tax collector that gave them the highest bid. But if you gave the highest bid, you had to pay the highest bid. Zacchaeus was a member of the community. He knew the people. He knew how tightly they could be squeezed, and he must have squeezed them or else he wouldn't be rich, because he would have had to pay the tax to the Romans and then have enough for himself. This not only gained the Romans additional income, but it served as a brilliant way to keep the people that they were oppressing fighting with one another by using one of their own. Because if they were fighting with one another, it'd be hard for them to unite against a common enemy. Zacchaeus was right in the middle of all of this. The people hated him because he squeezed them for everything they had. The Romans didn't care about him except for what he could get them. No wonder he wanted to go up, to get away from all of these people that hated him. But Jesus told him, come down. Can you imagine what it would be like to be Zacchaeus, having finally gotten to the place where no one can bother him, the place that he can see Jesus, no one else is in his way? He was away from the crowd of people that hated him and were scoffing at him. And then Jesus tells him, nope, come right down into the middle of all of this, right in the middle of your enemies. And Zacchaeus did it. He came right down into what was happening on the ground, because that's where Jesus was, right on the ground, in the middle of the problems of the world, of the injustices, the prejudices, the divisions, the hatred. Face to face with Jesus, right on the ground, in the middle of all the things that are wrong. Jesus said, come down and welcome me into your home. Zacchaeus was happy to welcome Jesus, and in that day it didn't just mean Jesus, it meant Jesus and all of his disciples and probably some of his followers. Zacchaeus started out wanting to see Jesus, but Jesus took that desire and turned it into a face-to-face real encounter, a welcome, a breaking bread. He wanted Zacchaeus to welcome him. And he wants Zacchaeus to serve him, not just see him. That's where Jesus takes our desire to see him and turns it into a true encounter, welcoming, breaking bread, and serving him. And this is where transformation happens. Jesus changes the desire to see him to a reality of knowing him, in truly encountering him face to face, and then serving him. Knowing him doesn't happen all the way up, away from the problems of the world. Though yes, we can and often need to experience him in times of retreat. But in this story, Jesus himself is right there in the middle of people's everyday lives, walking the dusty roads. That's where we know him too, in our everyday lives. And it's in our everyday lives that Jesus wants to make a change. Jesus says, today, salvation has come to this house. It was today when Jesus came up close, welcomed Zacchaeus to be with him face to face, around a table on the ground, right in the middle of the problems of the world. Salvation comes when Zacchaeus announces a change in his heart, a change in his practices, a change that affects his neighbors, it affects the community, not just the way things are, but the Jesus way of generosity and justice, the way of compassion. Jesus is seeking and saving the lost, all the lost. You want to see Jesus? I want to see Jesus. To know him, to encounter him. We all want salvation to come. Jesus calls us right into the middle of what's happening in the ground, what's happening in your own life, what's happening in the community, in the world, because that's where he is, walking the dusty streets among the people, right in the middle of the problems of the world that need changing. Salvation comes to Zacchaeus when he really knows Jesus up close, when he's filled with compassion rather than greed or self-interest, when he makes a change, not just in his life, but in the lives of those around him. That's when Jesus says, today salvation has come. This is what Jesus does. Jesus makes a new way of compassion, a way of generosity and justice, not just between him and Jesus in their hearts, but for the whole community. Jesus made a change. Zacchaeus made a change. How will you receive Jesus into your heart, into your home? How will you see him at work, in the everyday problems of our world, the small ones, the ones that seem insurmountable? He's calling us to come down right into the middle of the world that he so loved and came into to make a change. The way of compassion, the way of mercy, and the way of justice. How will you welcome him, encounter him in his fullness, and make a change?